What's up everyone, Soldier First Class here, and today's mission, I'm here to discuss one of my favorite games of all time, Hello Kitty Island Adventure. Fine, I guess we'll talk about Final Fantasy X. The Final Fantasy series is my all-time favorite game series, so it's no surprise that some of the games are in my top 5 favorite games of all time. But right at the top, tied at number 1, is Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy X. You guys hear me talk about Final Fantasy VII all the time, but I realize that a lot of you don't know some of my other interests. I want to change that and become more personal with my content and show the many sides of Soldier First Class. Final Fantasy X is so special to me because it came at a time in my life where I was struggling with a family loss. I played the game when I was 10 with some friends, but didn't even own the game until I was 11 at the end of 2002. My grandmother had recently passed away, and video games were always my escape, and Final Fantasy X was the game to fill that void. I go back to this game and play all the way through at least once a year now, and each time I feel myself falling in love with it all over again. So let's start off by talking about the story. Final Fantasy X features one of my favorite openings to a video game ever. The world building of the narrator talking about Tidus' father Jecht, signing blitzballs for fans, but what really sticks out in my mind is the first introduction of Auron, Final Fantasy X's somewhat father figure. You can hear Otherworld playing in the background as a large and imminent threat is making its way towards the city. Tidus goes for a shot outside of the blitzball arena and sees the beams of light coming towards him. As the city is destroyed, you know things are going to get crazy, and quickly. Auron plays the role of guide throughout the game and serves as a mentor for the party, which is made very apparent through the game's tutorial segment at the beginning. He teaches Tidus the basics of combat as they make their way to an unknown destination. The two eventually end up underneath the monster, both swallowed by a blinding flash of light. We learn about this threat and come to know it as Sin, but we don't know what purpose the monster has or where it's from, only that it has caused death and destruction in Zanarkand. Speaking of tutorials, Final Fantasy X features the best tutorials I've played in a video game. They work them fluidly and naturally into the story, and what seems like a tutorial is not only teaching you the game, but the lore of the world around you. I felt like this is the perfect way to handle tutorials, and wished more games handled it in such a natural way. As Tidus wakes up, he feels lost, alone, afraid, much how I was feeling at the time after dealing with my grandmother's loss. I began to see myself resonating with this character. Over the course of the game, Tidus struggles to find his place in the world of Spira. He also discovers that the Zanarkand he once knew has been destroyed for 1,000 years. As he finds himself 1,000 years in the future, he has no friends, no family, and the one person he trusted is nowhere to be found. Through a series of interactions with the party members and learning the ways of Spira, he begins to grow. But one constant remains, his hatred for his father Jecht. It burned him to his core that he had to listen to how great his father was all the time, and then when he comes to Spira, he has to hear it all over again. Especially with someone he grows to love romantically in Yuna. She loves Sir Jecht as she affectionately calls him. Even far away from home, he can't escape the fire of hatred that he has for his father, and that fire only burns hotter when he finds out that Sin is Jecht. Oh God! Mix in a young love story that's one of the best in video games, tainted religious teachings, some deep-seated racism towards these guys, and multi-character redemption, you've got one hell of a story combination. I think one of the signs of a great JRPG story is making characters feel like real people inside of a fantasy setting. Emotions, struggles, and character growth, 3 things that if done well, leaves an impression that lasts a lifetime. Now, granted, some of the voice acting can be a little cringe, but it's part of the charm, you know? When it comes to leaving a deep impression on me, Final Fantasy X did just that, and much, much more. Final Fantasy X's characters are some of my favorites in the entire franchise, with Auron trailing Vincent and Cloud from Final Fantasy VII. The complicated dynamic of the party just adds to its incredible growth. Tidus isn't the only one learning the ways of Spira, as all of the characters get a chance to learn a thing or two. Some even set aside their cultural differences and work together for the greater good. Tidus making peace with his father Jecht is one of the best moments in the entire game. A lifelong obsession of hating his father, Tidus in his own way finally lets it go. Unfortunately, it took killing his own father for it to happen. It's one of the toughest moments to watch, even though it's Tidus finally putting the past behind him. Seymour also represents that villain that will stop at nothing to achieve his goals, with death not even stopping him. His corruption begins to shine through as it's found out that he murdered his own father to become the leader of his people. Yuna and the party kill him at Macalania Temple, but before he can be sent to the far plane, his lackeys come in and take him away. Seymour will come back 3 more times, each time being more monstrous than the last. What's actually crazy about Seymour, though, is that his goals actually are in line with the party's, but for reasons he believes to be of a divine nature. Seymour and the party both want to rid the world of pain and suffering, however Seymour wishes to do so by exterminating all life on Spira. He wishes to become Sin and destroy everything, only then does he believe that Spira will be free of pain. Some may consider Yevon, the leader and founder of the Yevon religion, the ultimate villain, but for me, it's Seymour. Seymour's troubled past is one that is very detailed in the game and drives him towards his goal. Anima is actually the aeon whose soul is that of Seymour's mother. Seymour had a troubled youth as he dealt with being hated for being a mixed-race child, and the only person he felt comfortable with was his mother. She sacrifices herself so that Seymour could defeat Sin and become a hero to the people of Spira. That drive for acceptance led us to the villain that we see today. There's so many levels of storytelling in this game that to go over all of them would lead me to an hour-long video, but I'll leave it here and head on to the next topic as I want to talk about the combat and why I love it so much. Coming off of the ATB system for most of my JRPG life, Final Fantasy X's conditional turn-based battle system is one of the best I've ever played. It takes the best part of turn-based combat and amplifies it. Depending on choices you make in combat, your turn order is determined by a lot of different factors such as speed, power of the previous attack, status effects, and more. It also features enemy affinity types, where each character has an enemy they're specifically good against. The best example is Wakka and his affinity for the flying type enemies. He will be the most accurate and efficient option when it comes to fighting flyers. Then there are Final Fantasy X's version of limit breaks, overdrives.
Sunlight Yellow Overdrive!
No, not those overdrives, these overdrives. These overdrives are insanely powerful and are some of the most powerful attacks in the game. Overdrives become especially powerful once you get to your celestial weapons or Final Fantasy X's ultimate weapons. These weapons ignore the damage limit of 9,999 and end up allowing you to do the most damage in the entire game. There's also a deep mechanic that helps you make more efficient use of your overdrives. You have different overdrive modes that you can earn just for playing the game. Heal your party several times and you'll earn an overdrive mode that specifically gives you more overdrive meter just for healing the party. This is not only a cool game mechanic, but also one that rewards you just for performing combat moves. Final Fantasy X also features my favorite summoning system in the entire franchise. Instead of traditional cutscene based summon animations, Final Fantasy X allows you to control your aeons or summons every move. From standard attacks to their own overdrives, every move your summon made was because of you. That type of power had never felt so great for me and in my control. Final Fantasy X featured for the first time a way of leveling up your summons and teaching them abilities how you see fit. Throughout the course of the game, you'll pick up components that allow you to customize your aeons with abilities and stat boosts. They become true powerhouses and a key strategy in any situation. It even featured 3 secret aeons that you unlocked via different side quests. These were some of the most powerful summons in the game, and 2 of my top 5 favorite summons of all time are featured among these, Anima and Yojimbo. The embodiment of pain and suffering, and a really awesome samurai mercenary that is literally an insta-win against even the game's toughest bosses. Seriously, this thing is basically a cheat code. I mean, just look at this. This is the game's hardest boss, by the way. Needless to say, in the right circumstances, summons are some of the most overpowered moves in the game. They are also heavily tied to the lore of the game and are a part of your journey to collect. They are acquired by praying at temples that house stone figures known as Faith. These Faith are the souls of those that sacrifice themselves to become a summoner's ally. Each Faith bestows upon you the summon that aligns with their souls, typically of a certain element. One such summon, Bahamut, is a key catalyst in the story itself. Summoning is one of my favorite aspects of the series, so the whole concept of Final Fantasy X surrounding the aeons and a summoner's pilgrimage to defeat Sin was an easy sell for me. Acquiring them is considered a test of your resolve, and when a summoner is done with their pilgrimage to collect them, they must find the holy city of Zanarkand. Here the summoner will pass one final test and obtain the final summoning, but there's a catch. For a summoner to obtain the final summoning, someone must sacrifice themselves to become the Faith of the final summoning. The sacrifice must share a deep, emotional, and possibly romantic bond with the summoner. A significant other, a family member, or even a best friend is required for it to work. This is the final test, and one that challenges the resolve of both the summoner and their sacrifice. This deep connection to the world of Spira is one of the pieces of the Final Fantasy X puzzle that truly takes a dark turn. And it's for this reason that Final Fantasy X is one of my favorite stories ever told. The highly customizable weapon system is still easily one of my favorite customization systems in video games. Weapons would take on characteristics that you built them with, and even change name and appearance. The ultimate weapons were a real pain to get, but once you did, they felt so worth it to me. One thing I do love though is that there's a weapon known as Brotherhood, a sword entrusted to Tidus that belonged to his friend Wakka's brother, Chapu. The sword is pretty basic, but ends up being the best non-customizable weapon in the entire game. As the story evolves, so too does the abilities the sword acquires. It feels like the sword is growing alongside its wielder, and it's an extended representation of Tidus and his character growth. Then there's actually building your characters. The sphere grid, Final Fantasy X's leveling system, seems daunting at first, but over the course of the game, you begin to learn how customizable it can be. Want Yuna to practice black magic, becoming more of a hybrid mage type that has some of the best magic stats in the game, you have that option. It's all up to the player and the route you want to take them as they grow throughout the game. It's very versatile and makes for some interesting combinations of attributes and ability sets. Some fans have even taken up the challenge of a no sphere grid run of the game, and it's one of the great accomplishments that I've yet to do with Final Fantasy X. I've been planning one for years, but just never got around to it. Maybe a future video series, perhaps. One major knock against Final Fantasy X from the critics is the linearity. However, it basically follows the same story progression as any other title, it's just a little bit more blatant about it. The difference for me is that instead of a few drawn out and sprinkled locations, everywhere you go feels like a location itself. You may not have an overworld map where you can freely walk within the confines of the map barrier, but you do have highly detailed locations that create the beautiful world of Spira. You may be going down designed pathways, but I never really felt that way with 10. Its story, atmosphere, and incredible locations just felt right. It's a different style of linear progression, but one that makes up for it in charm and ambience. And the game also really opens up in the late game, and it's got one of the better post-games that I've played in a JRPG. Each location in the game is unique, from different themes, races of people, and flavors of life. Towns are small by design, and the way they implement that into the story is beyond genius. They tell you that towns don't get too big with Sin around, and that's why Bevelle is the biggest city other than the port city Lucca. Sin stays away from these two cities for some reason, so they've been allowed to become large. From Besaid Island to Zanarkand, each location feels like a treasured memory and a character on its own. I always save the best for last, and that's the minigames. Okay, but seriously, I love this game with every fiber of my being, but fuck that chocobo race. Now that we're actually saving the best for last, let's talk about the soundtrack now. Another masterpiece, Final Fantasy X is my second all-time favorite video game soundtrack. That is of course only after Final Fantasy VII's masterpiece soundtrack. Every major moment is boosted to new heights, and the soundtrack conveys so many emotions. From happy to sad and laughing to crying, Final Fantasy X's music is a character on its own. I'd say that my three favorite songs are To Zanarkand, Otherworld, and Auron's theme. These are tracks that will stick with me for as long as I live, and I listen to them whenever I write a script for a Final Fantasy X video. Uematsu, Hamazu, and Nakano captured so much of the essence of Final Fantasy X in their compositions that I can't help but have all sorts of emotions when I hear it. When I hear certain tracks, I remember playing those story beats. I remember how I felt over the years, how I felt the first time I played it, how I feel even now. Overall, is Final Fantasy X a perfect game? No, it's definitely not. No game really is. But games don't have to be. They just have to resonate with you or fulfill your need for a quality story with maybe some relatable themes. They just have to be perfect to you. And that's what Final Fantasy X is to me. You may not like the voice acting, the linear pathways, the battle system, or even the story, but for me, Final Fantasy X is a perfect 10 out of 10. And if you find yourself not liking these things, just remember, soldiers, you can always play Rage Shadow. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to omni-slash that like button. Let me know in the comments section below how you feel about Final Fantasy X. Subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell to join the ranks of Soldier today. And for all the latest Final Fantasy news, content, and video essays, I'm Soldier First Class, and I'm on to the next mission. Later, guys.